As we creep closer to training camp, I look at 5 players who the Sharks should consider to at least bring in on professional tryouts to see if they can maybe make the team.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Western Conference Tuesdays on the Locked On NHL channel. Want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Probably part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be discussing PTOs and looking at players who I think have shown some ability in the past that could be an asset to the San Jose Sharks. So we're going to look at 2 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie, and then kind of talk about some of the issues with maybe bringing one of these guys on and how it relates, especially with the AHL veteran rules. So before we get to all that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So we are getting into PTO season, and you're starting to see teams signing some guys here to come in and, be tryouts. And just as a quick reminder, so professional tryout is you bring a guy in, let him kind of hang out through training camp and see if he can potentially make the team. The Sharks had success with this last year with Justin Bailey, who was a professional tryout, played in the AHL for about 16 games, and then played basically the rest of the season in the NHL and earned himself a new contract this offseason. So if for a team like the Sharks, right, where you're kind of in flux and you're trying to build things, I think for Mike Grier, kind of searching through, turning all those rocks, searching for that acorn, searching for that diamond in the rough, for a guy who can come in and contribute at least for a year, either whether it's in the NHL or in the AHL. But try to find some of these guys who can maybe contribute to your team that you could either turn into assets later on, or just, maybe help kind of lift the floor of, as we continue to try to raise the Titanic that was the 2022, 2020 or 2023, 2024 season. So I looked at guys who I thought have shown something in the past, right? Guys who maybe it wasn't last year, but the year before they did something, or maybe, new change, like a change of scenery really maybe hurt them, but like guys who've shown something and helped to solve some of the Sharks issues. So we're going to start with the forwards, then we'll move to the defensemen, and then we'll get to the goalie / kind of the issues with the AHL veteran rule. So let's start. If you're watching on YouTube, there's slides. If you're not watching, I'll, of course, read the slides as I always do for the listeners in your car, wherever you're listening right now. So my first guy, Dominik Kubalík, 6'2", 190-pound left wing. Last season played with the Ottawa Senators. We had 11 goals, 4 assists, 91 shots on goal, played 1207. Corsi for 42.98, goals for 26.67. I bring up Kubalík because the dude, he can score goals. Twice was his his rookie year, he put up 30 goals playing for Chicago. And even just 2 years ago playing with the Red Wings, he put up 20. He's a scorer. The Sharks, if you were in a coma for the past season, they struggled to score goals. They were the second worst team in the NHL at 2.20 goals for per game. Only the Blackhawks were worse, and you can equate a large chunk of that to Connor Bedard missing, what he missed 4 to 6 weeks or whatever it was with his fractured jaw. But the Sharks, they struggle to score goals. Kubalík, dude scores goals. Does he do other stuff? That's to be determined, and sometimes-ish, maybe. But for a team that needs more offense, Kubalík is a guy that could potentially bring more offense. So looking from Evolving Hockey, if you look at his last season where he played with Ottawa, he was kind of playing between third and fourth line minutes. He was a first percentile, which is bad. Player, third percentile offensively, sixth percentile defensively. Didn't play much on, he played on the power play a little bit, but didn't really have a great year with Ottawa. Ottawa also bad team. 2 years ago with the Red Wings, 48% playing second line minutes, 48th percentile player, 51st percentile offensively, 29th percentile defensively. Scored a ton of goals, scored 20 goals. Playing also a good amount of time on the power play. So there has been he has been a guy who has played well previously. So he's not going to provide much defensively, but he's a guy who I think is worth bringing in on a PTO and see if he can score some goals for you. And the problem is, right, you've added Tyler Toffoli, Will Smith, and Macklin Celebrini, who are all supposed to be in top 6 roles, to go with Granlund, Eklund, Zetterlund. That's 6 guys if you're trying to get top 6 roles right there. So would have a bit of a fight to kind of make an impact. And I think he's one of those guys who kind of has to play top 6 minutes or kind of play a lot of power play. And you paid for a better goal scorer with Tyler Toffoli to a long-term contract. So maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense in that regard, but still, these are guys who I just want to, you're not signing them to long-term contract, just bring them into camp and see if they can kind of show something. And especially, for example, if Will Smith maybe gets off to a slow start or you have to start him in the AHL or something like that, just another guy to kind of have around. So that's my first guy. Next is an old friend, much different role. Steven Lorentz, who still without a contract right now, 6'4", 206-pound center, played 38 games with the Stanley Cup champ Florida Panthers, had a goal, 2 assists, 30 shots on goal. Only played 847 average time on ice last season. Corsi for 50.54, goals for 23.53. Steven Lorentz quickly became a fan favorite for the Sharks in his year here before getting traded for Anthony Duclair. And of course, the Sharks then traded Duclair for a 3rd round pick and Jack Thompson. And we're going to continue to track that trade tree because it's going to be an interesting one. But Lorentz is still out there as one of those kind of bottom 6 guys who can play penalty kill. He's going to play tough minutes for you. He really, especially his time in San Jose, you really saw him play well and provide really solid stats defensively. And again, bigger sample size because he played more minutes for the Sharks, played almost 3 times as much minutes for the Sharks than he did for the Panthers, but was great on the penalty kill. Both, kind of play more minutes per night between that 3rd and 4th line minutes for the Sharks, where he's a 77th percentile defensive player, kind of playing those types of minutes. Last year, you saw the offense go down, and he didn't really play as much defensive. He still was able to chip in defensively. Didn't get to play much on the penalty kill. So wasn't given an opportunity, I think is kind of the best way for it. So Lorentz, I think, still a really positive player. He's great in the locker room. He's beloved in the community. And I think if you're still going through that, you want to add quality pieces, Lorentz is a quality bottom 6 player. The problem, though, of course, right, is you overhauled your entire bottom 6 this offseason. When you traded for Ty Dellandrea, you traded for Carl Grundstrom, and then you claimed Barclay Goodrow off of waivers from the New York Rangers. All those guys kind of do the same thing that Steven Lorentz does. So would be tough for him to kind of crack the roster, especially since you put assets into trading for Dellandrea and trading for Grundstrom. I know Grundstrom, when you just flipped Kyle Burrows, and Dellandrea, you gave away a mid-round pick for him, but you got Barclay Goodrow for free, but you put a lot of assets to try to kind of fix that bottom six pairings there, or bottom six group. Give yourself some more flexibility, so that way you're not having to call up your Barracuda guys who are expected to be in the Barracuda all season, like a Ryan Carpenter, and give you a little bit more cushion between your top guys and your Barracuda guys, right? So again, Steven Lorentz, I think, is a good player, and I think he's an NHL caliber player playing kind of bottom 6 minutes. But I just think the Sharks have also added a ton of those guys. But still, wouldn't mind bringing him into camp and see what he can do for the Sharks. And if he goes to the Barracuda, it would be a really nice addition in the middle, kind of to help build up that middle center depth. So we'll move to the defenseman next and kind of look at two names who we've talked about earlier this summer, who are still out there for some reason. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. We're driven by the search for better, and when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So, join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of the show can get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right. Before we get to the defenseman, again, two names who are still out there. It's a little confusing that they're still out there. Do again want to thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. For your second listen, go check out one of the other great Locked On shows. Of course, you have Locked On NHL, which is still pumping out 5 episodes a week. Myself and Seth, we're on every Tuesday to cover biggest stories in the Western Conference, or any of the shows here in the Bay Area. Right, you got Locked On Niners with the football season right around the corner. Locked On A's, Locked On Giants, Locked On Warriors. So for your second listen, go check out one of those great shows here. So, all right, 2 defensemen we talked about earlier in this summer and said the Sharks should sign one of these guys. They're still unsigned. First, of course, is Tyson Barrie. Tyson Barrie, 5'11", 197-pound right-handed defenseman, played with Nashville last season. 41 games, 1 goal, 14 assists, 65 shots on goal, average 18-19 time on ice. Corsi for 44.12, goals for 48%. Barrie was one of those guys who change of scenery, I think, really hurt his stock. The season before last, he was traded as part of the Ekholm trade that brought Mattias Ekholm, who brought to Edmonton. He goes to Nashville, right? Which made sense for Edmonton's part, right? They're trying to kind of boost up their defense core. They needed a defenseman who was a little bit more defensively responsible. And with the growth and evolution of Evan Bouchard, they kind of take over that Tyson Barrie role of being like the top power play quarterback and more kind of driving the offense. In Nashville, he doesn't really get the same opportunities, right? You have Roman Josi, who's #good. He doesn't kind of get the same opportunities, and he didn't really produce, especially with those goals and stuff. Enter San Jose, right? You don't really have a power play quarterback. It's probably going to be Jake Wallman, but right? I feel like you could upgrade that position. And I know Kalen Addison is supposed to be kind of that guy last year, and he's a little bit in the Kalen Addison mold of he's going to Barrie of he's going to provide you way more offense than defense. But Tyson Barrie is much better with a longer track record than Kalen Addison. So looking at kind of 2 years ago, when he was with Edmonton, playing second pairing minutes, 53rd percentile player, 88th percentile offense, a ton of power play. Was it 258 power play minutes that season? Last year cut that down to 113. So, which makes sense, right? You have Roman Josi. Roman Josi's good at hockey. I think for the Sharks, who are still in that, like, we could use a little bit more juice on the blue line. Tyson Barrie is a potential guy there. We'll get to, actually, I'll talk about the next guy, Justin Schultz, and then we'll kind of lump both those guys into like the why not of it. So Justin Schultz, another guy, 6'2", 190-pound right-handed defenseman, 70 games for the Kraken last year, 7 goals, 19 assists, 100 shots on goal, played 1628, Corsi for 53%, goals for 39%. Schultz, I think between the two, is more defensively responsible than Tyson Barrie, but the Kraken were really smart in the way that they leveraged him, and they gave him, pulling up Dauber's prospects, he got really sheltered minutes against very poor competition. So he's getting a lot of offensive zone starts against poor competition. So was that the team being smart? Or was that a worry that a guy who's now getting ready to enter his year 34 season, Father Time is undefeated, right? So kind of the why nots, I think, for both of them is you just acquired Cody Ceci. And yes, I know Ty Emberson for Cody Ceci is a kind of a clean swap there when it comes to roster spots. But Ceci's a much more established player, right? You have a lot of veterans on this San Jose Sharks defensive roster. You know, you have Jake Wallman, you have Mario Ferraro, you have Jan Ruda, Mark-Edward Vlasic, whose contract is going to be here until the sun explodes. Matt Benning is coming back from injury. Like, you have a lot of veteran guys, and that leaves basically one spot for Henry Thrun and Shakir Mukhamadullin to fight for that spot. So if you bring in another veteran defenseman, where you eventually want these young guys to play because they need to play at some point. And none of these veterans are really going to kind of be part of your next core. Maybe Mario Ferraro sticks around, but like Wallman's like the only guy who's kind of still in his prime at 28. Vlasic's 37, right? Rude is 34. Matt Benning's 30. Cody Ceci's 30. And then Schultz and Barrie are both 31, 34. So between the two, though, if I had to pick one, I think I would go with Schultz. And here's why. Because I think he's more defensively responsible. I think if you're going to play sheltered minutes, that's not the worst thing in the world, especially if you partner him with a young defenseman like Shakir Mukhamadullin, right? Left-handed defenseman. He's played 3 NHL games. A little bit more offensively oriented. Schultz, I think, can be a good defensive guy. And though Schultz and Mukhamadullin are going to play shelter minutes anyway, you might as well pair them together, and it gives Mukhamadullin a really solid sounding board for a guy like Schultz, who has won 2 cups in his career, to kind of be a partner and kind of learn from. So if you're trying to look at upgrading the power play quarterback or give some more options there, Barrie is probably the guy. But if you want a little bit more well-rounded defenseman, I think Schultz is the way to go. And I would, if I had to choose between the two, I would probably go with Schultz. But he's 34. Maybe he's done. Maybe he doesn't want to play for a team like San Jose. Maybe he's waiting for the right opportunity. Who knows? But maybe a team like Edmonton, who could use a cheap defenseman. Maybe he's willing to go play out on a vet min contract for a more competitive team. But who knows? So anyway, those are the two defensemen that I would potentially look at. if you wanted to add at least another body and see what happens when it comes to camp. So we'll look at the goalies and then kind of talk about the issue of, well, why don't you just sign them in the AHL here in just 1 second. If you're looking to get tickets for maybe you want to catch a baseball game, you got Niners get ready to kick off here, or whatever football team you root for, or you want to go see a comedy show, whatever it is, you need to check out Game Time. They just created a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff so that way you can find only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They're the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. Filter only incredible deals on your great seats with Game Time Picks. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. They have all-in pricing for if you make sure you opt in for that. That way you know exactly what you're going to pay. No surprises when you go to checkout. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, before we get into our last segment, again, thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you watch on YouTube and hang out, I'm going to kick you straight over to the Locked On Network channel, which is running 24/7. The biggest stories going on throughout all of sports. We curate the best of the best and put it out there so you can watch and get caught up on whatever is going on in sports. So if you're watching on YouTube, go straight to this, or you can go check it out over at Locked On Network on YouTube. So, a goalie. I know the Sharks are looking more for a prospecty goalie, and yes, the whole Askarov question, which we are going to right now until we hear anything. I think the Askarov question is going to be kind of just floating out there until training camp, and we'll kind of see how that goes. But for the Sharks, if you don't get Askarov, I still think you need a third goalie. And I know they said they want a more prospecty goalie, but I'm more in the get a solid veteran goalie, especially we've covered it on great extent here on Locked On Sharks, right? Mackenzie Blackwood's health has been spotty throughout the past couple seasons. We have Vitek Vanecek coming off a season-ending injury. And I would rather let Romanov and Krona just kind of marinate in the AHL right now and not rush them to play NHL game or big stretches of NHL games until later on. So here's a guy who played a ton of NHL games last season. And if you called him up, I think would be if he were to stay around, I think would be a good addition for the Sharks because he's not going to, the moment's not going to be too big for him. That's one Kevin Lankinen. Played for the Preds last year, 6'2", 285 pounds. Played 24 games, 282 goals against average, save percentage 908. Gave up 56 goals. Expected goals allowed was 60.1, so his goal saved above expected was 4.1 with a 750 high danger save percentage. Those are solid numbers. And yes, Nashville's a much better team, et cetera, et cetera. Like his numbers are going to be better. But if he's playing in the AHL as your like goalie, and then you have Romanov and Krona, and especially with the AHL schedule, right? You have a lot more back-to-back games, especially on the weekends. You need goalies. You need more goalies in the AHL because of the weird schedule, right? Especially with, again, back-to-back games, 3 games in 4 nights. Like it's a little bit more compressed in some of those areas. So having a dude who's played a lot of NHL games, not the worst thing in the world. And again, if one of your NHL goalies gets hurt, he can just come up and play NHL games for you, and it's not going to be too much for him. Pulling up his kind of from Evolving Hockey, he played really good in front of the team and with the team in front of him. Like, he played better than kind of expected with the team in front of him at even strength. On shorthanded, the team in front of him played poorly, and he played poorly as well, which is whatever. It's, I'm more concerned about the 5-on-5 of it all. I would be more than happy to bring him in and see, especially if you're worried about. We haven't heard anything on Vitek Vanecek. The assumption is he's supposed to be ready, but I think just bringing in another guy and giving it a little bit more cushion between your NHL goalies and your prospects in Magnus Corona and Georgi Romanov. So he's the guy who I would be very interested in, and to bring in. And we'll see what happens again with the Askarov thing. I'm not holding my breath right now. I think this is a deal that probably gets done closer to training camp or sometime during training camp, especially if Askarov makes us think about it. But we've seen a lot of NHL moves this past week, which has been really fun. So we'll see. But the big kind of cloud hanging over all this, right? Because a lot of, why don't you just bring them in and they can play AHL games if you want to sign them, just like you did kind of like with Justin Bailey, right? Just bring him in, whatever. Just as a reminder, so our good friend Tony Androkaitis, who was on the show earlier this month, big guy, right? Covers the AHL, inside AHL. Like, if you want AHL stuff, he's the dude. So he was actually just wrote about this today, and like kind of how there's almost like the middle class of the AHL is kind of getting squeezed out. So they have the AHL in the 2014-15 season implemented the development rule. Of the 18 skaters, not counting 2 goalies, the team dressed for a game, 13 must be qualified as development players. Basically, they have to have played 260 or fewer professional games. Well, of those 13, 12 must have played 260 or fewer professional games, and that's in the AHL, NHL, and European leagues. One can play between 260 and 320. So that leaves you, not a math guy, but 18 skaters, 2 goalies. That doesn't leave you a lot of guys who can 18 minus 13, that leaves you 5. You can start 5 guys who are considered veterans. And the Barracuda have been pretty aggressive about adding veteran pieces this offseason, right? So you're running out of slots for some of these guys, right? And everybody wants to play. And you're going to have to kind of cycle in some of these veterans. But Andrew Portolowski, right? Veteran. Colin White, who they just signed last week, veteran. Scott Sabard, veteran. There's 3. Then you get down to the defense, right? Lucas Carlson, veteran. Jimmy Schultz, veteran. I think Jack Thompson is getting close. He's at 134. He's okay right now. You're starting to get to the... You got 5 right there. Justin Bailey, veteran. There's 6. Bailey's played a bunch of games. Like, you've got 6 right there. And yes, you don't have to play those guys every night. And you can kind of flip and guys are going to get hurt and et cetera, et cetera. But the Sharks can maybe add another veteran type of guy and see how things go. But I get why the rule is put in place, right? You want the AHL to be a feeder league into the NHL. But this is why you see a lot of these guys maybe not signed right now, because there's really no spot for them. So it'd be interesting to see maybe if going forward at some point, if the AHL looks to kind of increase this, allow for more players to, veteran players to continue to play here in North America, kind of play in the AHL. Go read the article. Tony does a really great job of kind of breaking it down and talking to players and, guys who are then kind of forced to go to Europe, but then they're not used to playing on the big ice and they're just they're not able to kind of translate their careers, maybe kind of get cut shorter than they should because of this rule. So great article. Go check it out. But just something to keep in mind as the Sharks look to maybe add some more pieces here is you don't have enough slots for everybody, especially with this veteran rule. And, maybe they can add, like I said, they can probably add at least one more veteran type of guy. But you have to be smart about it in that balance of you want to start winning games with the Barracuda, but you also want to still want to develop your young players. And that's what this program's for, especially for the Sharks, which is a rebuilding team right now. So we'll dig more into the Barracuda. I was going to try to do it this week, but want to spend some more time kind of doing the research on it. So we'll dig into the Barracuda next week and kind of talk about if it's time to maybe start to believe a little bit in this Barracuda team. So make sure you follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can watch on YouTube as well. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter at MyFryhole. Until Monday. Bye, friends.